did not get any notification now. So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we will get started. Brenda, would you take the roll, please?
Absolutely. Board Member Brisky.
Present.
Board Member Mercier.
Present.
Board Member Ridley.
Present.
Board Member Roth.
Present.
Board Member Freeman. Councilmember Anderson. Councilmember Woodward.
Present.
Mayor Sierra. Vice Chair Havenick.
Present.
Chair Moore.
Present. All right, thank you. Next order of business is approval of minutes from the September 13th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the September 13th board meeting minutes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. Any comments, questions, corrections? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Next up is public forum. Brenda, do we have anyone this evening?
We do not.
Okay, we will move on to item 5, new business, city ditch piping project. And Peter, I believe you get the mic.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sarah's gonna bring up the slides and run the slides for me. But thank you, board. Tonight we'll be presenting the recommendation for approval of a contract for design of the city ditch piping project. And this is the initial phase of that project, which is conceptual through preliminary design. So the overview, if you all recall, we've talked about this quite a bit, but we have segments of city ditch between Chatfield and the Allen plant that we would like to get enclosed in a pipeline. We also would like to verify the capacity of the other pipe sections to allow us to essentially deliver water from Chatfield to the Allen plant close to year round. And that this should help us from a source water quality perspective to help improve our taste, odor, and hardness issues, specifically hardness in this instance. We issued an RFP in July of this year, and we're looking to have that piece of it, that part of the scope complete by June of 2023. Talked about this. So we just as a review, it's taste, odor, and hardness, but we also have resiliency, safety, the operational costs, and just sustainability for keeping water in a piped enclosed environment. We lose less to evaporation. So those are the reasons why we're approaching this project this way. Here's what we looked at when we put out the RFP. It's basically nine areas. You can see what they are, but it's generally all the preliminary engineering aspects of a project. So initial alignment, right of way, property, things like that, analysis, preliminary design. But I want to highlight community outreach. So we have had a significant amount of interest in this project since we've talked about it, and so within this process is a number of community outreach meetings to work with the interested parties who would like to provide input on how this project advances. And this is the phase to do that in, as we start to come up with alignment ideas and possibilities for how this ultimately can be constructed to achieve the water supply goal. There could be other options, and we want to make sure that we have that opportunity to talk to those impacted stakeholders, most specifically the historic preservation societies who've expressed an interest in this. We went through a selection process. Like I said, we did an RFP. We had 6 firms submit, and then we actually interviewed 3 firms. We interviewed Jacobs, Carollo, and HDR, and ultimately settled on Jacobs. They had what we thought was the best project team, best experienced project manager, as well as a really sound approach to how to accomplish this first phase and really look at those alternative alignments. And they were the team that actually conceptualized the idea that there might, when you go with a shorter straight line alignment, that you save the cost of pipe installation, which actually might benefit those that are looking to protect the historic nature of the ditch. So and I've specifically worked with the PM on from Jacobs on a previous project at my previous organization, and it was a large diameter pipeline about 4 miles long, and it was very well executed. So we were comfortable after we went through the interviews that Jacobs is the correct engineering firm to complete this project. We've also added to the original proposal, the original proposed base price, $20,000. And what that's for is we anticipate immediately moving this into a construction manager, general contractor bidding approach, which is a different, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the meeting. But that process, we want to get their help as we start the process of selecting a contractor. And so we've added essentially an account line item to draw from to help with those services, leading to a total contract amount of $441,257. Additionally on this, because we're in the preliminary phase and there's a lot of unknowns around survey and property, we also are requesting a 20% contingency. And what it essentially does is it helps us advance aspects of the design that maybe we didn't have a complete grasp of the scope on, while not slowing down the total project so that we can move into final design phase. So this would be the time to have more of that owner-directed contingency to be able to accommodate a request for potholing or a request for a survey that wasn't originally anticipated as they start to determine the alignment and the existing pipeline and ditch as it is. And so that is what we're proposing tonight. It's exciting. It's the major step moving this project forward. And once we get into design, then the project really gets rolling.
And looks like Jim and then Ty.
Thank you. Question, the other two bidders, the top two on that list, was there some reason that you weren't interested in them, or?
Yeah, their proposals didn't hit the mark. So the Hazen and Sawyer one, you could just tell that it wasn't going to accomplish the scope that we needed to. And then the Landmark Engineering, just the quality of the proposal indicated that they were probably not they weren't a firm to move forward with. So this is one of those situations where you don't necessarily go with lowest price, because lowest price can create a real problem for the project. So you go with best value, and where you can see the spread in pricing, it goes from 255 all the way to 878. And so we're on the low, we ended up selecting what we believed was the most cost-effective, best valued approach to executing the project.
Okay, thank you. Another question. I would assume that probably there's along the line, there'd be some sort of pump stations. I mean, this isn't all gravity, is it?
No, it is all gravity.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Those are my questions.
All right, thanks, Jim. And Ty, you put your hand down. I'm assuming you were asking something similar.
Yep, same question.
All right, that was mine as well. Any further questions? Okay. Then could I get a motion to recommend City Council approve by motion a professional services agreement with Jacobs Engineering Group for the city ditch piping project in the amount of $441,257, including approval to execute any change orders to expend a 20% staff managed contingency in the amount of $88,252 for a total project authorization of $529,509.
I move.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further comments, questions? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries. All right. On to item 5B, Peter.
Okay, thank you. So this one is, I'm trying to resize my screen here. So this is our annual process to renew our professional service agreements with Berg Hill, who's our water rights attorney legal firm, and Martin & Wood, who is our water rights engineering firm. And this is essentially what these two firms do, is they protect our water portfolio. And we've been under contract with them for many years. They have the history of our portfolio. And really, this is important for us to be able to, as water becomes even more and more scarce, to be able to protect and optimize our water rights portfolio. So these two contracts are essentially the technical specific firms that work solely in the water rights space to help us accomplish those goals. I think I talked about all this, so we can jump ahead. So really, why we keep with these firms, what you do is there's only so many of these firms in the Front Range, and so once you have a team that you work with, because of the historic nature and the multi-year approach to a lot of these cases and a lot of these issues, once you have a set of a water rights legal firm and an engineering firm, you typically stick with those. It's not something where on an annual basis or every 5-year basis you go back out, because there's only so many of these firms. And so once you have your team, you move forward as long as the value is being provided to the city. I think one of the things that has occurred over the last couple of years is we've taken a much more active role at the city in managing their work and managing their efforts. I know they appreciate that, because for many years they were essentially off on their own, protecting the water rights portfolio of the city without with a pretty hands-off approach to that. And so I think what it provides for us is a much stronger connection to what the internal staffing priorities and strategies are, with the supplement of the specific water rights knowledge that comes from these two firms. So if you recall, this is a set of PSAs that has been on the wrong cycle for a few years, and we thought last year we were actually going to be able to get them on the right cycle, and we just missed the window on it. Well, we're finally doing that. We're finally moving it from a July to July renewal cycle to a January through December renewal cycle. So we just renewed these back in July to get them through the end of the year. And then what we'll do is we'll close those POs, and then we'll reissue new POs associated with these new contracts to be on a calendar year cycle moving forward. What we have planned for 2023 is, I think, a lot of the things we talked about. So they help us with our strategic water rights planning. We have demand analyses that are required as we start to understand what our longer term, how the city's going to develop longer term. We have capital planning that they help with, and that capital planning is largely on the source water system. So the water rights, the water collection system up in the mountains, or along some of the other ditches that we have. We look at yield optimization, so ways to maximize the yield out of those ditches and potentially channeling the right improvements to improve those yields. We look at water quality. Water court is probably one of the most significant things that they help out with, because there are just dozens and dozens of ongoing cases that we're the initiator of, or we're an opposer in, and those are important for us to be a part of, to ensure that we don't have any of our water rights injured. Within that, we potentially have litigation activities. Actually, as an example, we were in a court case that was potentially to go to court, I believe next week, and we were one of the last opposers. And so the issue here, this is briefly to give you a sense for what they're paying attention to. So Loveland was looking at lawn irrigation return flows. They had quantified those in a particular way that we didn't necessarily think that the quantification approach was appropriate. So we've been negotiating with them over the course of a couple of years to get them to understand our position on it. So the issue is, if they claim too much water, then what happens is it lessens the amount of water that's in the Big Thompson system, which then makes it to the South Platte system. And if there's less water in the South Platte system, it could result in what's called a rebound call up the South Platte towards Denver, which ultimately affects our McClellan 48 right. So you can see how a project in Loveland affects potentially the yield and the ability to divert water into McClellan based on that 1948 right. So that's just an example of something that we were able to stipulate out on and get what we ultimately believe was a satisfactory result. But we were essentially a week before going to court. And so every opposer stipulated out on that, and we think we got a good resolution. But that's just an example of how far reaching this all is. So for July through December, we had anticipated 225 for Martin Wood and Berg Hill at 350. For the January through December of next year, we anticipate Martin Wood at 400 and Berg Hill at 450. Keep in mind that these are estimated contract amounts. If we don't spend it, we won't. It just goes back to the water fund balance. So this is just an estimate based on what we think is a potential for this year. However, if we don't need to spend the money, we won't spend the money. So if we're able to stipulate out of a court case, that saves a lot of money in court costs. And so we saved money this fall by not participating in that trial. But we have to anticipate that we potentially will. So this is how we came up with those numbers and what we'd be looking for in terms of renewing those PSAs. I'll open it up for questions.
Ty, go ahead.
Hey, Peter, is there any scenario that you would move any of this in-house in the near future, or is it strictly contracted out? Is that the long-term plan?
So I don't think we're big enough. I think that's the challenge is places like Denver Water and Aurora are really large utilities that I think have the capacity to bring this in-house in a way that allows for the full-time expertise to stay within the city for a long period of time. I think a challenge for smaller utilities like us is if you have one person dedicated and they work for our city for a few years and then they leave and go somewhere else, then we're left recruiting again for that very specific talent and that very specific skill set for one position. Whereas in Denver and Aurora, I think that they're a blend of outside legal consultants like what we're talking about, as well as in-house who help manage those. So I think it's really just, it comes down to a matter of size, and I just don't know that we're big enough to warrant it.
Thanks.
Any additional questions for Peter? All right, seeing none. Can we get a motion to recommend City Council approve items 5B1 and 5B2 as written?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Thank you. All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. And now we'll move on to 5C, development review fees. And Sarah, I think you'll take the lead.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So this item is to seek Water Sewer Board support for updating and adding fees in 2023 to recover the Utilities Department costs related to development reviews. So for a little background on development currently going on in Englewood, utilities engineers staff currently review residential, commercial, and industrial development and redevelopment applications to ensure that these new developments will meet our water and sewer standards and can be served by our system, by our water and sewer systems. Over the last year or so, staff has conducted up to 400 reviews, and these can range from single family to large multifamily or commercial developments. And due to increasing workloads associated with implementing the critical capital improvements that we are planning for the water system, we've engaged with a third-party consultant to take over a majority of the workload for development reviews. So currently, the Utilities Department does not charge development fees to developers for any type of review related to the water and sewer system, putting this cost burden directly to current utility ratepayers and not to the developer. So these fees were designed with the intent to reimburse our internal and external costs and place the cost burden appropriately on the developer rather than on current ratepayers. So here's a task or the list of tasks that we've identified for reimbursement. A lot of these are confirming that we have the capacity in our water and sewer systems to serve the new development. There's civil and civil plan reviews and plats that are a part of the major minor subdivision reviews. We run a system capacity verification. So that's using our hydraulic models to make sure our system can handle any new development. We would potentially charge for a variance request, and that's, you're all familiar with the issue we had a couple months ago related to the variance to city code. And then any building and site permit plan review could include city plans, landscaping plan, or civil plans, landscaping plans, plumbing plans. Any of those reviews would ensure compliance with our standards as it relates to the water or sewer system. The second to last item here is fire hydrant flow testing. So this is required for developments to so that we can have information that we plug into our hydraulic model, ensuring that our capacity can serve fire flow in that area of the development. And then developers can also use that information to design their internal plumbing and fire protection systems. This test is performed with our utilities distribution and collections staff and uses specific equipment. So we'd look to recover costs there as well. And then finally, if there was an excess number of meetings or phone calls, we would potentially recover developer communications through these fees. So this is the proposed fees for 2023. The internal engineer labor, that's our utilities staff engineers. We set that fee at $135 an hour. This is an increase from $85 an hour, which is the current fee in 2022. And the reason we set it at 135 is because of the third-party labor engineer rate that we show here at between 100 and 175 an hour. We're trying to average, what that might be if we assigned it externally or internally with staff on the project. We occasionally have a utilities tech assigned to development reviews. These are much smaller reviews, but that individual will take the time to make sure it fits within our water and sewer standards. So that fee would be $46 an hour, and that's based on the rate at which he's paid plus the benefits that the city provides. And then finally, a fire hydrant flow test. We set that fee at $225 per test. That is consistent with what Denver Water charges for this test. And our utility staff verified that this amount was appropriate for the level of effort related to the work here. So if approved, utility staff is proposing to implement these fees for new projects initiated in 2023. So projects that are already under the review of either community development or utilities currently, and that could fall into next year, would not be subject to these fees. And we would also waive any fees associated with plan reviews for a single family owner occupied property, as those tend to be really simple reviews and there's little need to confirm that there's capacity in the water or sewer system for those particular changes. Utility staff is recommending implementing these fees by requesting an upfront deposit from a developer in order to start the review. So our proposal is to require a $1,000 deposit for residential developments with 4 units or less. And then for commercial, industrial, or residential developments greater than 4 units, we'd require a deposit of $5,000. And then staff would use the invoices from the third-party consultant and the hours spent by internal staff to charge against that deposit. We'd use our city's financial software for invoice tracking and reporting those costs back to the developer. And then upon final approval of whatever the application is from utility staff, the remaining amount that's in that deposit would either be returned or would be returned to the developer, or if needed, we'd request additional funds if that deposit was expended. So staff would do its part to ensure that the appropriate time was spent on reviews and really provide the best value and transparency of the cost to the developer. And as an initial step to doing that, we're finalizing a draft of a water and sanitary sewer connection agreement. And that would specify the terms and conditions by which a developer can connect to our water and sewer systems, and then provide the details for the deposit and what costs would be reflected against that deposit. So it's our intention to bring that agreement to the Water Sewer Board for your consideration in November. So in summary, that this is intended, the number of fees that we're trying to add to the fee schedule for the city is intended to assign the costs really to appropriate users. So we're not subsidizing, excuse me, development review rates through the ratepayers, and accurate cost recovery is from the developer. With that, I'll open up for questions.
Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, would the standpipes in a, let's say, high-rise building, would they be considered a hydrant then?
I do not know the answer to that.
Okay,
Are you talking about for fire flow protection or?
correct, for fire flow or for water flow.
I don't think that's a hydrant at that point in time. I think that's a fire flow system, and those are pretty complex systems when you're looking at high rises. So they have to put an actual fire line in, and so there's a development review process associated with that. So a hydrant is, I think, when you're looking at that hydrant, what we're typically thinking is a typical hydrant as you would think of a hydrant, and testing that.
Well, and actually the hydrant test is even before that development is placed. We're trying to figure out what the pressure is at that particular location to understand whether or not the pressure is adequate to serve what that development will be.
So in doing that analysis, I assume you'd probably figure out whether there's enough pressure to utilize the standpipe that, let's say we have that 14-story building going up on Emerson. So I would think at the top of that building, that'd require a lot of pressure. So I understand what you're saying. It would be figured in the analysis at the hydrant.
Correct. And the design of the fire flow system is would be done by the developer based on the results from that fire hydrant test.
Okay, thank you.
Not seeing other questions at the moment. Sarah, and I'm sorry, just to clarify, did you say this also covers community development's time or just utilities?
Just utilities time. So community development does charge developers to initiate a review, and they have their own set of fees.
I was going to the next question I was going to ask, I think you just answered, which is, do we have any analogous situations where we pass these charges on to the specific parties? It sounds like we do this already, community development wise. Any other examples come to mind that just kind of says this is par for the course?
Yeah, so I believe Public Works has the ability to do it, to charge developers as well. I don't know what their process is. Previous organizations, I have also seen this done where there's charges for system review and development review as it fits within the water and sewer system.
So I'm kind of curious historically why this seems like a very reasonable thing. I don't recall prior discussions around this. I was kind of interested in our why we haven't thought about doing this further, or if there was conscious reasons why we didn't. But I think that's more of a institutional knowledge issue that none of us are going to remember at the moment. And I'll leave it at that. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. So can I get a motion to recommend City Council approve the 2023 fees associated with development reviews as presented?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
Anyone? Wonderful. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. No old business. We'll move on to staff's choice. And whoever wants to take it from here.
Yes, we have a few items tonight. I'm going to do a couple of them, and Sarah will handle the other ones. So we'll start with the discussion about our contracting methodology. So I think Sarah will have a PowerPoint that'll come up here shortly. So one of the things that we wanted to start to talk with the board about is really new ways of completing construction that they've been around for years, but they're not, they haven't been necessarily used extensively by the city over the course of the last, several years. And I wanted to at least talk about one of the methodologies that we use. That we are using at South Platte Renew, which is very effective in helping us with the challenging construction environment. And given that it's been working well for us, it's an approach that we are planning to move forward with some of these larger projects. And so just talk about the two that we're going to talk about the different methodologies and the rationale as to why we would look at other alternatives. So that's what this discussion is. We're going to start with design bid build. So design bid build is generally what people are used to, and you can see the contractual relationship. So the city of Englewood hires an architect, engineer, designer. and then they hire a contractor separately. And so they're separately contracted by the city. But what changes is the timing on that. So on the next slide, you'll see the way design bid build works from a timeline is, first thing you do is you select an engineer, and then you design the project from 0% all the way to 100%. And then you go out to the street and you put a bid out for the street to bid on the project. And then you start the construction. And then after you receive the bid, and then you start construction, and you essentially spend the next period of time completing the construction. So you start with a bid cost that is defined at the time. It's a hard bid at the time of submittal of those bid prices. And then through construction, you end up typically with a certain amount of change orders, because there were assumptions made by the design engineer that didn't involve a contractor's analysis, review, or understanding, that results in change orders. If you've got really exceptionally well executed design, then you can minimize those change orders. Additionally, you'll get change orders associated with timing of materials and delays in material delivery, things like that. And so the goal for this process is to get the design as completely understood and completed at the time of engineering, so that when it translates to construction, there's minimal change orders. And that works well sometimes, and well, it works well often, but there are also other times it doesn't work so well. So another approach to construction that we are using more and more is construction manager, general contractor. And so it's a form of alternative delivery. So there's a large umbrella of contracting methods that fall under alternative delivery. And there's design build, there's progressive design build, there's lump sum design build, there's construction manager at risk. There's a multitude of these types of different construction methodologies. The one that we're using effectively over at South Platte Renew, and have been for the last 3 years or so, is construction manager, general contractor. And essentially it's similar in the sense that you have the city hires the design engineer and then hires the construction manager, general contractor firm. And then that firm bids out packages for the work as the design is progressing. And so it's an opportunity to bring in if we go to the next slide, this will help with this. It's an opportunity to bring in the contractor earlier in the process to help define and refine and value engineer the scope, and then eliminate the risk associated with unknowns as pricing is developed over the course of the design. And so what you end up with what's called a GMP, or a guaranteed maximum price, at a point in time during the design process that the contractor feels like they have a complete understanding of the project scope and risks, and can then price that accordingly. The other key relationship in here that's not on the slide is what's called an owner's advisor. And that owner's advisor is that third-party engineering firm that helps us ensure that the pricing and the bidding from the contractor is competitive and market and consistent with the market. And so what these alternative delivery contracting methodologies rely on is what's called open book. And what open book means is they provide all their pricing information, and you can end up with a pricing estimate that has 5,000 line items associated with it. And for in-house staff to be able to to understand the complexity of those line items, it's a lot for a in-house city to understand. That's why we hire an owner's advisor, because they're the ones that go through the bidding and for the line item pricing with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that we're not being overcharged or double charged, or there's not embedded profit that that we were anticipating, just to keep everybody in the relationship honest. The way we select the contractor is actually it's a qualification based selection. So you don't have that final bid price yet, because you actually make the selection early on in the design process. So for example, with the city ditch project, what we will be proposing and bringing to the board in the next several months is, now that and assuming that the council approves the design contract and move forward with Jacobs, we'll follow right behind with that, with soliciting for a CMGC contractor, so that we can roll them into the project early on, so that we can start to have a strong understanding and a strong project understanding, so that we can get the best pricing and the best scope for the project. Some of the benefits that you get out of this is you get a much stronger partnership between the city, the contractor, and the engineer. You get less adversarial, because the relationship is established early on. There's a lot of owner control in terms of being able to refine scope as pricing is coming in. Whereas with a hard bid project, we know our engineer's estimate, but you could send that out to the street and it could end up being 50% more than what the engineer's estimate is. What this does is it helps us progressively build those estimates over time to ensure that our scope that we're trying to get accomplished is fitting with our budgets. Another area that this really more recently is helpful with is supply chain. So we have situations where there's equipment that typically has long lead times and could be, normally was 6 to 9 months for a lead time. It can be upwards of 18 to 24 months. And what the CMGC process does for us is it allows us to issue an early work package to get that equipment on order, so that we're not waiting 2 years for a piece of equipment to come in on a project that may only have a project duration of 18 months. And so by quickly understanding what the equipment you need is and getting that on order, you mitigate some of that supply chain challenge, because really lead times are all over the place right now. And pricing of those long lead items, a lot of contractors are unable to accurately price them because they don't know when they're going to get delivered. So what they do on a hard bid situation is they'll put in as much, they'll inflate that pricing to minimize their risk, so they're not left holding the bag or losing money on that item. When you use this methodology, you get to lock in the pricing, get it on order, and ensure that you don't have that price volatility built into inflating the overall bid. It also allows us to accelerate the schedule, because we can get early work packages going. So what you'll often see is several GMPs. So for one of the most recent projects in South Platte Renew, we actually had 4 GMP phases. There was early equipment, then there was some early earthwork, and then there was the main package, which was the main bulk of the scope, and then there was a final package that was the last elements of the scope. And ultimately what this process helps us with is really understanding risk associated with the project, and helping us dial in that understanding of risk to ensure that we're not going to be left with a situation where the bid comes in so high that we can't actually complete the project because it's outside of our budgeting ability. A few of the projects that we're looking at, you can see here is we have some water treatment improvements at the Allen plant. City ditch piping is probably our first major project that will really be really significant major project on the utility side that we'd be looking to utilize this model. And then once we get to the point where we can complete the Big Dry Creek diversion construction, we likely utilize some form of this methodology. The advantage on the city ditch piping where we can see the most benefit of this process is getting the contractor on board and part of that project team as soon as possible in the design. If you let the design go too far, there's missed opportunity to value engineer the project and come up with the better solution. So the challenge with this is these types of methodologies rely heavily on transparency and trust, because what you're doing is you're hiring a contractor before you have any idea what the price of the project is going to be, because you're establishing that initial relationship, and then you're building the pricing ultimately through the development of the design and initial construction of the project. And so that's why it's so critical to ensure that through the quals-based selection process that we bring in contractors that understand our needs, and we truly understand their markups and their general conditions, and ensure that the relationship provides the best value once the project is actually at the point of construction. So I think that's the general overview for CMGC, and I just wanted to initially talk to the board about it because it is a new way of contracting than what the city typically has done in the utilities department.
Any questions for Peter? Marjan, go ahead.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for that explanation. I just was wondering, so you were saying this kind of helps with their skills of educating us and getting the scope to decrease the risk and then kind of forecast what kind of risk coming. But when you were saying that this kind of gives you some sort of insurance, but how much that insurance is occupied? Let's say like they were predicting that the cost of certain piping would be certain amount, but then it turns out to be higher than that. Since they're offering their skills, and I'm pretty sure they're getting compensated for that, what kind of a comeback do you have? I mean, okay, you give us this expertise, but then when in future it comes out, how do they handle the situation if it's not as what they forecast? Do they end up paying for it, or does the contractor end up paying for it, or does the city of Englewood end up paying for it?
So that's what the process actually defines, and so it's an evolution through the design and estimating of the project. So essentially, what happens is we bring the CMGC contractor on board, and they have a pretty small fee to participate in that design process. What they do is they provide us a GMP at 30%, and that 30% has a lot of assumptions and associated risk built into that number that as the design progresses, that risk and that understanding of those scope items refine that pricing such that they can refine their pricing down to be able to accommodate to be able to accommodate the pricing as it's associated with the level of risk associated with the item that they're trying to bid. And so what happens is you get a GMP at 30%, you get a GMP at 60%, and you get a GMP at 90%. And what that does is that tracks with, as the assumptions of the project are turned in less away from assumptions to more true understanding. That way they can price it accordingly. Once you establish a GMP and the scope associated with the GMP, that's the guaranteed maximum price for that scope of work. And if it comes in more because they missed something that they should have gotten, then it's on them to ensure that the project is delivered. If it's something that's outside of anyone's expectation, so if it was something that was a changed field condition that nobody anticipated, that's something that would likely be some kind of a shared risk. When I've done these projects in the past, what you develop initially right out of the gate is called a risk matrix. And that risk matrix, you have a whole bunch of items that are scope items that have a certain level of risk associated with them. And then the risk has a dollar amount to it and a percent likelihood of the risk occurring, which then translates to you multiply the dollar amount times the percent, and then you get a risk value. And then we total that up, and that's the risk matrix amount of unforeseen or understood, for lack of a better word, scope items that as the design progresses, we get clarity on. That was a long answer to your complex question. I hope that
it was very helpful. And thank you. It really, really covered exactly what I was looking for. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Not seeing any other questions, so I could probably move on, and a few items to squeeze in before the top of the hour, hopefully, Peter.
Yep. Thank you for that discussion. I think that was our biggest item to talk through. I believe the next one is it Backflow? I'm sorry, no. Yep. Okay. And that will be Sarah.
Yeah, so quick update on Backflow. So again, we're substantially ahead of where we were last year. The program is on track. Backflow testing compliance last month was 82%. We've now jumped up to 92% as of Friday. We are expecting actually to hit 100% by the end of December. So we're on track to actually to be ahead of this March 2023 compliance date, which is great news. And then the cross connection surveys, we were last month we were about 85%. We're currently at 98%. I believe there's 25 surveys remaining to collect from customers. So we're very close on that and are anticipating 100% compliance by the end of the month. However, there will be a substantial amount of follow-up that will need to be done as a result of these surveys, because we want to ensure that the information that's submitted by customers, is accurate and doesn't lead to some kind of uncontrolled cross connection in the system. So as of right now, we're tracking about 800 issues that will need to be followed up on next year by our contractor BSI, that's the program manager for this, as well as city staff. We do not have any shutoffs or red tag notices for non-compliance scheduled at this time. Customers that are not compliant with either of these two items at the moment are being contacted directly. So we're not at risk of shutting anyone off due to compliance at the moment. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
Go ahead, Marjan.
Sarah, I just was wondering, because when I was asking some plumbers about this backflow, I'm still a little confused about this situation, and I don't want to take the board's time. So once I meet with Peter, he does a fabulous job of explaining this. Maybe I can address that issue. But when I was asking the plumbers about this, a lot of them don't know anything about it. And so I just wondering, do you guys have like a selection of plumbers that you're guiding these consumers to go through? And how do they because how do they approach it? I mean, because when I asked plumbers, they had no idea. If you can help me understand that, it's just a quick version of that. Yes, I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. So on our website, on the utilities website, we have information about the backflow and cross connection prevention program. And there's a link to an external third party that does have a list of certified backflow testers. So as a city, no, we don't have a list of our own, but that information is available on our website.
Thank you so much.
Can I just add one more thing on this item? So about a little over a year ago, we had a state violation on this where we had to send out postcards to everybody because we missed the compliance deadline on this. And that's because the systems were not in a database. They were all paper records. They were not, we just did not have the systems in place. And to be a year on from that and utilizing an outside contractor and being at a point where we're almost at our compliance. This is one of those areas of process success that the team, Sarah and Josh and his staff have worked many, many hours to fix this process and bring BSI on board so that now we have systems in place so that we're not in a situation where we're sending postcards talking about how we violated a state regulation. So this has been a heavy lift for a year, and it's a credit to the amount of work that the staff has done to get us here.
Wonderful. All right, next topic.
Yep. Okay. So very quickly, I just wanted to provide an update to the board, or just an update to the board. 3 weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago, basically September 10th through September 17th, myself and Anna Schrader from South Platte Renew actually were able to attend the International Water Association World Water Congress in Copenhagen, Denmark. And it's a congress, it's a meeting that occurs once every 2 years, and we were able to attend this. We ended up getting an innovation scholarship from one of our association agencies that provided us $3,500 in travel reimbursements, so that paid for our flights and parts of our hotel. And really, it's water from a world perspective is what this conference is. And it was fascinating to see how the rest of the world approaches water supply and clean water issues across, globally. And I think some of the key takeaways that we came away with were there's a lot of focus on the sustainability, and within sustainability are the UN sustainability goals that were developed in 2015 that have the goal number 6 is on water. And it's really about globally being able to provide clean water and clean wastewater services to everybody in the globe. So there was a lot of focus around the trajectory of the globe in terms of meeting those goals that were established in 2015 by 2030. And as you can probably guess, the globe is behind in doing that. But that perspective, where I think what really struck me was we'd go into a talk on some of the most leading edge reuse type of innovation systems out there. So Singapore are world leaders in this, and Israel are world leaders in this. And so you'd see some of the most innovative and most advanced water treatment design technologies out there. And then in the afternoon, you'd go to a session and it would be some large city of several 100,000 people in Central America that just in the last 5 to 8 years built their first wastewater treatment plant so they're not dumping raw sewage into the river. And to see that contrast between leading edge global innovation and just really how much of the world is still lacks access to clean water really helped provide perspective in the US that even as challenged as some of our systems are, we're not necessarily nearly in as bad a situation. The other aspect of this trip that was important was at South Platte Renew, we have a pilot and research center project and program. And part of that is it's an innovation initiative that's designed to get ahead of these regulatory issues that are bearing down on us over the next 15 years. And so we have significant contractual or cost drivers for projects in the future. And one of the aspects of that park project is developing a relationship with a partner utility called VCS Denmark that is actually in Denmark. And the CEO reached out to me in May and said, hey, would you be able to come so we can actually meet face to face and really start to work on strengthening our relationship, as they are world leaders as it relates to innovation in the water and wastewater space. And so getting that connection to them and meeting them, we'll be able to learn how they're doing it, for lack of a better term, as it relates to trying to drive innovation in a space that doesn't necessarily always promote it rapidly. So those were the two main objectives of going. And we brought a lot of information back. I took dozens of pictures of slides of things that I want to bring back to bringing back to my staff. And then, like I said, it strengthened that relationship. But I just wanted to provide a quick update to the board that's some of the other stuff that we're doing.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Marjan, hopefully a quick question.
Yes, Peter, I was wondering if I could, get more information about this. Is this related to Agenda 2030 that is running with the UN?
Yeah, I believe it is associated with Agenda 2030. I think that they have 18 sustainable development goals. I think it's 18.
Yes. I would love to have some information about so I could educate myself with that.
Sure.
I'm aware of Agenda 2030, but I also would be interested to learn a little bit about the VCS. If you can give me some information about that, educating myself, that would be great. And I look forward to have a meeting with you so we can talk about some of these.
Yeah, we can talk about it at our next meeting.
Yes. Thank you so much, Peter.
All right, then final topic. February 2023 reappointment.
Yeah, that was just notifying the board that we have a reappointment coming up in February next year. Board member Brisky, and we are working towards that reappointment.
Wonderful, thank you. Anything from the board before we wrap up for tonight? All right, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, one question, and that's just, is there an update on the Centennial Water court case regarding rates?
Yeah, I can provide a quick update on that. So the court made their determination. It wasn't what we wanted. However, it wasn't anything that we weren't necessarily expecting could possibly happen. So we didn't challenge that because we didn't think it was worth appealing it, and we've moved into the actual appraisal component of this. And so what we're working towards is we want to do a joint appraisal, because doing a joint appraisal, which is contemplated in the agreement, is actually the most efficient way to get this done. And they're interested in doing it as a joint appraisal. We're interested in doing it as a joint appraisal. And since we've gotten the water quality question settled by the court, we're ready to move forward with that. And I believe we have a meeting this month to actually do a joint interview of that appraiser and then get that rolling. So we anticipate at that point in time, we think it's about 3 months to get that appraisal done. So we would be probably looking at Q1 of next year to have the new rates established.
And will that then go retroactive back to some point?
It is retroactive to January or February of 2021.
Great. Very good. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Seeing no further hands raised, I'll thank everyone for the evening, and we are adjourned.
Good night, all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.